Well, hello there, community. It's been a little while for me being in front of you, the community. I've been moving. What's today's date? It's August 25th. So I feel like I've been moving for like a year and a half. We signed our sales contract last July, and we've been in a rental. So in various stages of selling our old house, moving into a rental, packing everything up to move here and whatnot. So we're in the house. I'm not at all really in. I've got everything in boxes. In fact, I had some stuff in the background that I have a box that has a chair I haven't built yet sitting behind me. And so, I got a virtual screen today, which is fine. But soon enough, I will have an actual office view with a real background, and it'll be fine. And I don't have my quality mic, so if my audio is a little off today, my video is a little off, it's okay. The screen share part, which is the important part, that should be just fine. But keep me honest. If you're struggling with anything in view, let me know, and I'll make things big as we go. But today we're going to talk about iRules tracing. And before we get into actually building things and getting it set up and taking a look at what iRules look like under the hood, really for the first time, we're going to take a little history, walk through history. And it started way back in the day when iRules were introduced. You had this timing command, right? And so you could look at, in fact, I got a link here that we can bring up over in my screen, and I'll share this up. But I found this video. It's actually not even on the DevCentral channel. It's let me bring it up. Okay, it's not even on the DevCentral channel. It's on the DevCentral community channel, which I didn't even remember that we'd stood that up. But we have different things that you can do with timing, and you can enable that. This is way back in the iRules editor, but it allows you to kind of take a look at. Let me get to where. There we go. So if we're kind of looking at what you can do with timing, you can time it on or turn timing on for the entire rule. You can do it per request, and then you can turn it on the global, and then you can actually turn timing on and off in all the different events. So it allows you to take a look at CPU cycles. And so for a particular event or for a particular rule, how many CPU cycles are going to be consumed with that. And we had some tools back Then let me see if I can get to where, yeah. So you can end up with calculating out exactly how many CPU cycles, if you were to run that iRule in production, how many CPU cycles you would end up needing for the traffic load that you have. So you could very quickly come to, a rough guesstimate on, is my box big enough to run this iRule? And so timing is one of those things from the very beginning. So the next step along the way was I had written an article where I was looking at what you could do with TCL, and you could do it with native TCL, but you couldn't really look at what it was doing in the iRule. Let me share this up. So what I would do is, like, for the things in an iRule that were native TCL. So what you're doing, some kind of an expression, and then you could do mocks of, okay, I'm going to use like the IP client adder. Well, if I just put that in a variable, how the system is interacting with that, I could use this tickle unsupported disassemble command in TCL in the tickle shell. You could do this on Big IP, or you could do it, on any kind of a NIX box, whether it's Mac or Linux or Unix, or if you want to get crazy, BSD or something like that. And anyway, it allows you to kind of break down what's happening. So if I take an expression here and 3 times 4, what's actually happening in the bytecode, is it's pushing all of that on to the stack. It's doing that calculation, and then once that expression is done, it's done. But if you wrap that in the curly brackets, that's doing something special within Tickle, and it's a much more efficient operation. So it's not having to do quite as much work because it's using a built-in within TCL. And so that's one of the optimizations that we always talked about when you're writing iRules is make sure you're wrapping your expressions in curly brackets. And you can see down here the change. Maybe that's not big enough. Let me make that a little bigger. But you can see that the time between doing that expression 100,000 times, that's like an entire order of magnitude difference between wrapping that in curly braces and not. And so being able to do this kind of thing in native Tickle is awesome. We've never been able to do that in iRules. Well, that changed now coming forward to what we're going to talk about today. That changed when Jim and Han, who's no longer with F5, but he built in the ability to do that. And it's actually been out for a while. So the journey that I'm talking about, it's like timing. I wrote about it first, I think, in 2011. Joe and Colin had written about it before that. And then I did the native Tickle disassemble stuff in 2014. Jimin released this in 2017. So it's been out there 6 years, but I don't really see anybody talking about it, anybody using it. And so I wanted to resurface this and as an option when you're looking at the performance aspect and the profiling of what's actually going on. So if you're having trouble understanding the debug process or you're trying to debug a rule and log statements aren't cutting it, or you just don't want to fill your iRule with 1,000 log statements, you can turn on rule profiling, and then you can get that in the bytecode to see kind of what's going on and what's being assigned at what stage. And but then you can also kind of look at it to see what's going on under the hood and how these pieces are being passed back and forth. And so in 2017, and feel free, ask any questions along the way. I may not know all the answers, but I'll get them for you. Might take a little bit of time because Jimin's the one who built it, and I honestly don't know, who else is familiar with this, but I'll do my best to track down answers for you. And so one of the cool things I thought of in this diagram up, the whole thing that pushed this live stream is this diagram right here. I'm pointing, you don't see me pointing. This diagram here on the screen. This is the way that the iRule really passes back and forth between TMM and Tickle. Tickle is an independent, binary running within TMM, but the way the iRules happen is when an event is triggered in the iRule event loop, then that will hand off to the Tickle virtual machine, and depending on what you're doing in that iRule, it may hand back over to TMM, because there are ways that we've extended iRules, and so anything that's been an extension to iRule will come back out of the bytecode operations, and it will enter then back over to the TMM and run over there. So there's a process, but I always found this diagram a little bit confusing, and so where we're going today is to make sense of this and to see how it's really working under the hood. And so and we're going to try and do a little bit better of a job communicating that information visually, and eventually my hope is that we'll have tools that will do this for you. So anyway, that's the background. Now let's kind of talk about what we need to build. So first of all, we need to be able to collect these log entries. So if you come down here, you have an iRule, we'll build an iRule. And then part 2 of this article kind of goes into the brass tacks of how you configure rule profiling. So let me put that in there. We'll take a look at that real quick. And so here's the actual feature. So you have an iRule, and then in TMSH, you can build the tracer. So if you ever wondered what this LTM rule profiler is, that's what this is. We're going to profile an iRule. And so you can add event filters against different events. So if you only want to look at HTTP request, you only have to put that in there. But if you want to look at all the events in your iRule, you can do that. And so against that event filter, you're also going to add a virtual server filter, and then you need a publisher. So first we need a publisher. We need to have an iRule and we need to have a virtual server. So, and then looks like the occurrence masks, whether we're going to look at, if we go back to this other diagram, the model. Okay, so there's a lot of things that we can look at here. We can look at events, rule, the rule VM entry, bytecode, the command VM entry is there. Varmod is not on here, but anytime a variable is modified, there's also an occurrence for that. And then you have the command entry. And so we can look at that list as well. And so this is what the log entries themselves look like and everything. The timestamp unit is microseconds. That's like Unix epic format. And then so the cool thing is here is we get actual deltas of when these things are kicking off. So we can take a look at when, for example, from an event perspective, when HTTP request is entered. Here it's client accepted, but if you enter HTTP request, then you have an HTTP exit, or I'm sorry, the event of HTTP request entry that, and then an exit. Then you can take a delta of how long was I actually in that event for that run of commands. And so not just looking at every step in the way, but within each kind of major function. And you can kind of take a look at those deltas and see what that looks like. And so that's interesting information. And it's broken down into, I think, nine fields. You've got the timestamp, you've got the actual field of what's happening here, whether it's event, rule, command VM, varmod, bytecode, whatever's going on there. And then you've got what virtual server it's against, the event, if there's an event that is coming on there. And then the rule name here. So you got the virtual name, rule name. So you've entered the rule. And then this field is if you're entering the actual rule now, what command is going on. And so you have your remote handle. This is the TMM process. So if you have multiple TMMs firing on multiple iRules, you'll be able to see which TMM is processing that particular part of the flow. And then I think that's flow ID on the box. And then you have 2 tuples. You've got your IP address, port, and then I forget what that last part of the tuple is. So IP address, port. I don't remember what that last one is. Oh, okay, there it is right here. Route domain. There you go. So 3 fields: IP address, port, and tuple. So that's the remote tuple and the local tuple. All right. So that's what we're gonna build. So you can start tracing, and then you can stop tracing, and then you need to evaluate those logs. So let's do something. I need to get curtains up. I've got super glare. It's 11:15. All right. That was a lot of background, but I wanted to set the stage before we actually do stuff. So the first thing we need to do is we need to build a pool to collect syslog destination stuff. So let me log in, and let's build a pool. Should have scripted all this, but that's all right. We can do some click ops and some coding. All right, so rule profiler. Let's see, rule profile logs dash pool, and address for that is my Ubuntu server. Where am I sending those logs? 100. And then I'm going to use a high port so syslog doesn't cry at me on the Ubuntu server. Okay, so that should be good. 101, 100, and 5514. Syslog port is 514, and I'm just adding the 5 in front of that. All right, so now let's build a log destination. And we'll just call this test logger. And remote high-speed log. And let's go to the rule profile logs. Oh, I need to change that. Not TCP. We're going to send those UDP. All right. So let's do a log publisher. Test logger. Okay, so that part's done. Now we can go, let me see, playground. Let's go to LTM. Okay, so real quick, let's go back. We actually need to build some, so we'll use this virtual server, nginx-vip.tls. That's the one I know is working on the system. And then we need to build some iRules to apply to that. So let's create 2, because I want to see how this works from an event perspective, but also like using priorities. And so if I do tracing rule 1, let's take a look at, let me look at my notes here real quick. Okay. Actually, I'm just going to throw some iRules in here so I don't have to type, and we'll talk about it. All right. Is that big enough? Can you guys see that? Okay. So here I'm setting 2 different priorities here because I want to set in rule 2 a priority that kind of sits in the middle of that. And so what we're going to do here is we're going to set a client adder. So we're going to set a variable, and then we're going to log to the system priority 498 that I'm going to send that client IP, and then I'm just going to set that. So it's kind of a dummy iRule, but I just kind of want to look at what's going on in the system. And then we're going to skip to a different priority of 501. So what should happen when we look at this bytecode is it leaves this event and then goes to the event in the second rule, because I'm going to set that at a priority of 499, because that 499 should happen before this 501. And then I'm going to respond with a 200 of content get out. And so we'll see what that looks like. Let's go ahead and finish that. Undefined procedure get out. What am I missing? A 200. Oh, those are smart quotes. Smart quotes get you every time. All right, so Oh, and I don't need that last one. Okay, so that looks good. All right, so now we need a tracing R2. And I'm going to copy this in. This is the other priority. And I need to make sure that doesn't have smart quotes, and it absolutely does there. All right, so this is the second priority. So I'm not going to set any variables in this one. I'm just going to call the commands. And because this is a command from F5, and these are both commands from F5s, we should see that then leave bytecode and go over and do more things on the TMM side. So let's save that. Is invalid. What am I missing? You guys see it? Is that a smart quote too? Let's see. Requested tracing. Oh, I have it in the title there. All right. So now that I have the two iRules, let's go ahead and apply those to the virtual server. And for those who are watching and are not that familiar with iRules yet, I set my iRules priorities explicitly on the events, but everything in the system would be 500 as a priority by default here. But the way you order these matters. So if you move one above the other, that one will fire before the other one. So I don't like that implicit nature. I'd far prefer it to be explicit. So if you're going to use priorities between your iRules and events, make sure you are explicit on the event lines when you have your when statements. All right. So that's set up. The iRules are set. We have the log server pool, and we have our publisher. Now we can actually build our profile. And I need to clean up my var directory on my virtual machine because it is okay. So we want to go into TMSH, and we want to create a profiler. So create rule profiler, and let's DC tracer and event filter. The only thing we did here is, let me see, so syntax error, rule profiler. Oh, I'm missing LTM. Okay. So I need an add, and I can do what we wanted here, right? Now you can do all. Let's just start with that. And then OCC mask, we want to go ahead and do that. Just start with that. Requires log publisher to be specified. Okay, so let's add that. Publisher test logger. Okay, so let's do a list LTM rule profiler. We don't have an OCC mask on there yet, so modify LTM rule profiler DC tracer. OCC mask, I think, is okay. Is that an add or just a okay? Event rule VM command VM command var mod bytecode. Requested was not found. Nope, that's an underline. Where are my eyes out there, people? Okay, so let's list that again. All right, so we got our OCC mask on there. We got our publisher. We need our VS filter. So VS filter. And again, let's go to our virtual server. nginx-vip-tls. Is that going to be an add? Sometimes the tooltips in, and I missed my underscore again. Sometimes the tool tips in TMSH are inconsistent, drives me nuts. Okay, so it looks like we're good to go here. Now the only thing that we need to do is we need to enable it, okay? So modify LTM rule profiler DC tracer state enabled, okay? All right, so now that it's enabled, let's go ahead and, not campfire, let's go to the playground. And we need to go ahead and start our syslog listener. Okay, so it's listening. So I should be able to then run some traffic once we start the profiler. So it's enabled, then we got to start it. Let's see, where are we? Okay. So right here, yep. Okay, so let me quit this. And so we can do TMSH, start LTM rule, profiler DC, finally get the thing under. Okay, so we want to start that. Okay, so now I should be able to run some test traffic. All right, we'll just curl -k 101.50. Oh wait, I got to do that from. Hold on, I don't think I'm on SSH to unit. There we go. So I should be able to. By the way, one of the things. Well, I'll save that here for a minute. Curl -k. All right, so we got our get out, right? That's good. That's what we wanted to see. So if we come back to our running, there we go. So there's a slight delay on when it sends the things, but now we can go ahead and come back and stop the profiler. All right, so TMSH stop LTM rule profiler DC tracer. Okay, so that's off, but let's go back here and look at this syslog data. And we'll go ahead and save this in a file. Actually, it should be on Unix. It should be on there. Okay. So cd temp pychar. So what do we have? What do I call that? iRule tracing. Okay, yep. So we have that file. So if we pull that back, is that here anywhere? All right, so pwd. I have a remote SSH set up here, and I don't think it's exactly copying everything that it should, but let's just, okay. So I've got the sequencer. So let's do this. scp jron at Unix, and then iRule tracing.txt. Okay, so let's take a look at that file. Just close that. And all right, so This is actually the log entries that are generated from from profiling the rules. So if we take a look at this, we can see that we are I'm going to go ahead and delete those lines because one of the other things that we're going to look at doesn't like those for evaluating, and I haven't fixed that on the other end yet. But we see we're going to go ahead and enter the first event, and that's HTTP request. That's the only one we're looking at in this case. But we can kind of go down pretty quickly. We're entering the rule of tracing R1, and then we are entering tracing R1 on the rule VM side. So now we're over in the Tickle VM, and then we have some bytecode in here where we're pushing some stuff on the stack, and we're going to take that IP client address. We're going from bytecode over back to TMM, and then on the command entry, it runs the command. Then I'm going to exit that. I'm going to exit the command VM, and so we could take some deltas here, right? See how long it's actually taking to leave bytecode, go back over to TMM, and then come back. And then you can see here in the bytecode, okay, I'm going to store that value, and that's where you have the var mod. So at this point, say, okay, I know that I've gotten that IP address from what's already cached in that value, and now I'm going to store it as this string, right? And then I'm going to load more of that because I'm concatenating onto the log statement as well because I'm building out that big thing. This is a recording, Manoj. This will be on YouTube for forever. So if you just go out to the F5 DevCentral YouTube channel, you'll be able to watch it later. And so then you can see, then it's going to call log command and then go back. So we're still in that first event here, but then you see we're going to come down here. I'm looking for, so we're still in rule 1. I'm looking, okay, tracing 1. Okay, yeah, here's where I was looking for it. So we left tracing 1, right? And then we exited that rule. So now we're going to go into tracing 2, right? Because we had a priority that was there. And we're going to go through that, kind of do the same thing over in the other one. And we're going to exit rule 2. And then boom, we're back into rule 1. And then we're going to do that action. And then we actually leave the event. So we can see by our history of timestamps here that it did exactly what we were expecting it to do based on the priorities that we set. It entered the first rule once we're in the HTTP event, request event. It entered the first rule and it did what it needed to do, bouncing around the TMM and the Tickle VM, depending on if it was native bytecode in TCL or if it was proprietary F5 stuff that we added for iRules. And then it left that first rule to enter the second rule because of priority in the event, and then exited that iRule and then entered again rule number 1 to do what it needed to do. And so we can see what's happening at the bytecode level, what TCL is doing. We can see that it's not needing to store anything else. We had one var mod, right? Because we only accessed one variable, and we can see what it actually stored it as up here, right there. So we can see the value that it pulled out. Now, you may be looking at all this like, wow, that's a lot of stuff I'm going to have to comb through. Maybe my log statements are better. And if you're evaluating just looking through, rule profiling logs, that's probably true. And so that's, I think, where the tool side of things might help. And that's where we don't really have the tools to do that. There was one built that I'll show you a few years ago, but I can't even build it now. Docker's having problems and even locally. So I made some changes to get it somewhat functional. So we'll look at that here in a second. So I got iRule tracing. I'm going to just copy that. Actually, let me see. Okay. So that's what the logs do. Now let's take a look at what we can do with this data to make it a little bit more valuable in what you're doing. And so I'm going to start up this campfire project. Campfire is a way to be able to look at flame graphs of what happens with iRules. And so let me start that. And if I go, let me choose a file, not in downloads. Let me look at, I think that's it. Okay. So we can see that we kind of looked at, let me make this way bigger so we can actually move around in that. We had everything. Now you can use this to filter down and only look at one thing. And but this tool needs a lot of work. It needs a lot of help. And frankly, I don't know if I want to put work into what it is as it exists, because so much is being built into the F5 extension for VS Code, and maybe being able to look at sequence diagrams or flame graphs or whatever for this kind of data would be better served to spend the time building there. That said, not a TypeScript expert, and so my ability to solve on that end will be a work in progress of me learning how to be better at TypeScript. So no promises there, but I think that is probably where, if I'm going to build tools for this, if people see value in actually profiling iRules, maybe spend some time doing that. But you can look at the events from the very beginning to the very end. So event, HTTP request, and then you can come up to the rule, and you can see kind of how it's climbing the ladder from where it enters to where it ends. And you can see that what's different about this is not a sequence. This is a sampling of everything that happens. And so it's looking at how often did this show up in the log. And so you can see the number of samples at the event request versus the tracing R1 versus tracing R2, and then entering the rule VM. And the more data that you load into this, the tinier these things get with SVG. And so, you might have to blow this up really big, or, zoom in a little bit to be able to find what you're looking for. But you can look at the bytecode here, at concat, and then you can reset your zoom. But you can kind of basically see all the different ways. And so what the flame graph is good for, it's like if you're doing a particularly complex rule and you don't know exactly where some of your processing time is hitting, the flame graphs might be good for that. Like the invoke stack might be a little bit more time consuming, or like if you had a regex running, the regex might be a significant amount of the processing time of your iRule. And so being able to use the flame graphs to be able to find trouble spots, that can be useful. But this is not a chronology. But this tool is out there on F5 DevCentral in GitHub. It needs a lot of work, and it needed a lot of care and feeding for me to even get running for this demo. So there's work to be done there. Again, probably going to put that in VS Code, but that's one option that you can do with your data that it comes out. Another option I was looking at is using. Let me stop that and close Campfire. Another thing I was looking at is using UML and being able to sequence the stuff to be able to look at actually how the deltas are between event to event, but also within a entry exit pair. And so if we'll just, let me see, Python UML sequencer, and then I will trace it. And this is by no means perfect yet. Oh, I'm on the wrong system. Let me go here. Am I not in my? Okay. All right. Python. Do I not have? Yeah, I have it in there. Okay. Interesting. Okay. And then tracing.txt. Why is my okay? Okay. Try that one more time. Okay. So this is just a text oriented, and this UML does not build, by the way, in the tools. So this is something I'm still working on. And I was trying to have a better visual of this. This is supposed to be plant UML, and I'm just coming aware of UML as a tool and its uses and all that. But basically, looking at a way to build a unified modeling language diagram, a sequence diagram from UML, and so what this is doing is it's establishing the participants that should allow you your vertical columns, and then set up your deltas, entering each thing, and then so anytime that there is an exit point, then it's going to give me not just the delta from the previous statement, which would have been here, but also from the matching entry. So I'm 1 microsecond in and out. Some of these are 21 microseconds there. So nothing terribly long. Here was a 25 from rule to rule, 25 microseconds. So nothing. Here's the last one, 119 microseconds. So obviously nothing here is terribly lacking in performance. These are all happening very quickly, but it does give you a better view, a better way to kind of look at that. And this is text. It would become a sequence diagram. I lost my thought here. And so another thing that we could look at is something called zenml. And I was starting to play with this yesterday, and this looks kind of promising because it's a little bit easier to write. I might end up going back to plant UML for because this is at least in my tool, it's a cost item, where plant UML is open source. So if I do this one, I have to pay for a plugin in my IDE. So I probably won't go this route for the final solution. But for today, just to kind of visualize what we're doing, zenuml was an option. And so what we can do is kind of take our diagram and build out this zenuml. And so, without boring you with the aspects of zenuml, while I was playing yesterday, I had a couple different iRules that I was looking at, and created no CSS, so it's not styled at all, but with the zenuml you can actually style it and create that. So let me add file, and then sequence diagram.z, and then if I paste all that in, then so I'm taking a look at everything by a manual standpoint. I built this manually, by the way, so there's no code yet to take those log statements here and turn that into this. But that would be the goal for a tool that would help kind of visualize what's going on in your system. And being able to visualize that in a large scale, if you had thousands of entries, obviously, that's not going to work. So you'd have to kind of pull out one flow to do it. But just give you an idea of what's working on in the system is you can kind of walk through with this. We got the HTTP request, and we went into the tracing one iRule, and then we went into the rule VM, and then we had some bytecode going on in the Tickle virtual machine. And then, oh, I need to do something that's not native to Tickle, and that's an iRules proprietary command. I'm going to send that back over to TMM. And so kind of this is TMM here, and this is TMM. Right here in the middle, rule VM, bytecode, and varmod, all those things are happening in the Tickle. So if I were to style this in with some CSS, maybe color code them a little bit so it was easy to distinguish what is happening in TMM and what is happening in TCL. But you're staying your bytecode happening in the rule VM, and then you're kicking off over to TMM. You're actually running the command. This is actually getting it into the rule virtual machine. I'm sorry, the command virtual machine back on TMM, and then actually addressing the command. Then I'm going to pass that back down. I have a lot more bytecode. Here's my variable modification right there. A bunch more bytecode is going to happen. Then I go back to TMM to kick off the log statement, and then I'm done. And I exit out of my HTTP request. So if I had multiple events, that would be displayed here. If I was going to go into multiple iRules, in this case, I only entered tracing one, but in our example that we ran today, you would be going through tracing one, then tracing two, and then back to tracing one, and so on. But anyway, that's the gist of what I wanted to cover and talk about today. I think it's really helpful to be able to at least, if you're struggling with understanding what's going on and you don't want to build out a whole bunch of log statements in your iRules, and then turn those off with whether you're putting them in if conditionals or you're just manually going through a 400-line iRule and commenting out your log statements. This is a good alternative to be able to do that. Enable it, disable it, and then start and stop your profiling so that you're not impacting your production system for that. But it's a passive way to not have to change your iRules to get the same data from a logging standpoint. However, you may want to log in a certain way that gives you additional details that you're not going to get under the hood. And so in that case, yeah, still use your log commands and whatnot. But anyway, that's kind of that's the deal. That's what I was going to cover today. And we're a little short of time, but that's okay. I was excited to share the details and go through some samples. And I'm going to update some of those articles and eventually this diagram. In fact, I might just even use this diagram, but I'm going to update it with our example that kind of shows how you go in and out of the iRules, in and out of the events. In fact, maybe I'll add one more event just so that you can kind of see in a diagram how that does, so that first article on DevCentral is more clear. And so, and I'll add all these resources that I've linked and used in the comments on YouTube, and also in the DCC group on DevCentral at community.f5.com. So thank you all for joining today, and you're very welcome. Thanks for joining. Mel Kaniak, is that the I'm not familiar, is that the Canucks? I'm not a hockey fan. So I just moved from St. Louis. I was a Blues fan the year they won, but fair weather fan. And I just moved to Kansas City, the reigning NFL champions with the Chiefs. And so, I can follow my fair weather fandom all over the place. But, I've been to I think one or two. Oh, Carolina Hurricanes. See, I was way off. Well, that makes sense. That does look like a hurricane. So, yeah, my bad. So I've been to a hockey game. It's and it was super exciting live. I just don't go that often. And I played football, played baseball, played basketball. Although my freshman year basketball coach was also my football coach, and he's like, Jason, after we got through all the practices and getting ready for the season, he's like, Jason, why don't you go lift for football? And so I wasn't even good enough at basketball to be on his bench, which is pretty bad. But yeah, I'm a terrible shot. and I'm not terribly quick. My feet, I do not have quick feet, and so yeah, basketball is not my thing. But at least I played all those sports and I knew those sports, and so watching them on TV was easier. Hockey I never played, and so it's really hard to follow on TV. So it just wasn't something I got into. Anyway, I'm rambling. Thank you all for being here today. Make sure you watch the socials for the next DevCentral Connects with our amazing host, Boo Lamb. And we'll be out there in the community. Thank you all. And you guys have a great weekend.
Well, thanks for checking out that video. If you have any questions, leave a comment down below. While you're down there, hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't already. You might want to check out one of these videos over here. And if you haven't already, go check out community.f5.com. This is where all the DevCentral Connects hosts hang out, as well as the rest of the community. It's free to sign up, and we'll see you there.